August 12th, 2012. This is the Information Nation. I'm your host, Ken. On the Orion Talk Radio station, Orion Talk Radio, OrionTalkRadio.com, theinformationnation.com. Want to thank everybody for joining us tonight. We're going to do something a little bit different tonight. We've got a lot of clips to play for you. We're going to talk tonight about Gary Webb. You know, there have been a lot of deaths in this country, famous people, you know, JFK and Martin Luther King, RFK, but nobody talks about the little people. They get a little 5-minute blurb and that's it, and they're gone. And Gary Webb, for one, was not a little person. Gary Webb was a investigative reporter for San Jose Mercury News. And he was a Pulitzer Prize winner. And he was best known for his book called Dark Alliance. It's a series of articles that he wrote for San Jose Mercury News, and later published a book. And it was all about the CIA and smuggling cocaine and the Contras, all that good stuff people should remember. Back when the Reagan administration was in, you know, a lot of people put Reagan on a pedestal. Don't put him on a pedestal, knock his butt down too. Because like everybody else, Reagan was just another guy, just another man. But this may have cost Gary Webb his life. I'm not saying he was murdered. I'm not saying he didn't commit suicide. The official story is that Gary Webb committed suicide, that he sat in his apartment and wrote a letter to his wife and his kids. And then he was getting ready to move, so he posted a note on the door for the movers and said, don't come in, just call the paramedics. And then he shot himself in the head with a .38, twice. According to the coroner said, well, it's rare, but sometimes people do that. I have a hard time believing that. There's been so many questions about people who have supposedly committed suicide. Vince Foster was one during the Clinton administration. You know, they found him out in the park, but amazingly there was no blood splatter, but they called it a suicide. The problem being is I think he stepped on some toes. When he wrote the book, Dark Alliance, and he did the articles and everything else, he was just totally ripped apart by the mainstream media. And after some investigations, it turned out that, a lot of what he reported was absolutely true. So you put the pieces together on that one. Like I said, here's a guy that spent his life reporting. He's 49 years old when he supposedly committed suicide. And I say supposedly, and I mean supposedly. Do I know if he did or not? No. Neither does anybody else, but 2 shots to the head seems a little, how shall we say, suspicious. It's a shame that we lose people like this. It's one of the reasons that we lose a lot of people, a lot of good investigative journalists, is because they're scared. And they either end up dead, or they end up bought off, or they end up scared to do anything. According to Gary Webb, the smuggled cocaine was distributed in southeast Los Angeles as crack cocaine, made for one of the reasons for the crack cocaine epidemic that swept through a lot of the U.S. cities in the 80s. And it not only upset the black community, but it also upset a lot of conservatives out there, because this was being done by their government in their name with their dollars, just like the stuff that's going on today. You know, little things like Fast and Furious and Operation Gun Runner, and things that they don't mean anything to us. I mean, but these politicians are doing it in our name. I've said many times before that the government tends to hide things, and they will demonize people to no end in order to get their way. And if they can't get their way, they'll kill them. It's the same criticism that I gave last week of the Justice Department. I mean, John Corzine and MF Global, and we all know what the MF stands for, they lost $1.6 billion. And guess what? They're not prosecuting them. Ever wonder why? Could it be the fact, I'm not saying it is, but could it be the fact that MF Global was a client of Attorney General Eric Holder and Assistant Attorney General Lanny Brewer's former law firm, Covington and Burlington? I don't know. Could be. Stranger things have happened. And that seems to be about the way things are going lately. You know, it's the government just seems to do whatever it wants. And, you know, they get away with this. They get away with one little thing, and they get away with the next thing, and then the next thing, and the next thing. Before you know it, it's just bold in your face. Sit down and shut up. And that's a shame for what this country became before it became as corrupt as it is. And it is corrupt. You know, now they're into rigging elections. They're into pick one. Take all the things you can think about as being a criminal operation and write it down on a piece of paper and throw them out on the table and pick one. Because they're into all of it. If there's a buck to be made, they're going to do it. A lot of the drug trafficking that goes on in this country benefits the banks. It keeps them liquid. And that should be of no surprise to anybody. Banks just tend to screw the people too. They not only screw them on their interest rates and their mortgage rates and all the rest of this stuff and all the fees and everything else, but a little bit later on you'll hear in one of the clips I'm going to play, they rely on this drug money to be passing through their banks. During the Clinton administration, you had 2 young boys that were found dead on the railroad tracks. They said that train ran over them. They didn't mention anything about the bullet holes in their back. And one of these days I'll pull out all of that information and we'll talk about that. The mainstream media right now, rather than, well, I'll give you a good example. When Bill Clinton was being tried for what everybody said was just sex, the mainstream media pushed that. If you were a reporter and said, no, it's not about sex, it's about, and they would just lambaste you and tear you apart because they wanted their truth out there. The problem being is, it wasn't about sex. That was about perjury. He committed perjury to a grand jury, and he was impeached for it. But then Congress, with a right-in-your-face attitude, said, we don't care. We don't care what he did. We don't care how many witnesses you got. We're not going to remove him from office. So the idea that you've got any type of control in this government, until you replace these idiots, you've got none. And you've got to find a way to do it. But this has gone down. You can't name me one administration that hasn't been investigated by somebody. Reagan's administration, Bush #1's administration, Clinton's administration, Bush II's administration. But then there's Obama. It's amazing to me how the only thing they've got so far is Fast and Furious. They haven't looked into any of the other corruption that's going on. They have not looked into the other corruption that's going on in this administration. I wonder why. You know, and the main